And we're looking at Ask the Minister, in this case, the two of us. But it's not like we're giving definitive, answers that will be etched in stone for all time. But we are speaking to truth principles.
We're really not, really not, okay?
But we are speaking to truth principles based on our experience, based on our study, based on,
life experience.
Life, yeah. And a year from now, or maybe just during the town hall, I don't know, our opinions on these things may change. I was looking at a statement. It's a statement, a doctrine of unity that Charles Fillmore put together because people had pushed him, put together some sort of creed. And he said, well, I reserve the right to change my mind tomorrow. Mm-hmm. So we are, yes. So anyway, we're going to look at some of these questions. We may not get to all of them, but we're going to get to some of these questions that you all have submitted. And I know there's more questions that probably haven't gotten to us, but how about this first one?
All right,
DeeAnn, you want to?
I'll lead off here.
Give that a fly.
And I do really love this question. I keep trying, but I'm still having difficulty with faith. I have great difficulty really believing there is any presence that hears our prayers. Look at all the physically damaged people, for instance, who keep praying and nothing happens to improve their situation. I do believe that meditation puts me in touch with my higher self, and I can listen to that voice. Your comments, please.
Your comments.
My comments. So what I love about this question is that this question is what brought me to this teaching. Mm-hmm. This challenging place between our human experience and our spiritual understanding of who we truly are. And when it is aligned, it is just pure peace and infinite grace. And yet there are those times when it's not aligned, when what we're experiencing in the world just doesn't seem to line up with what it is that we know is actually the truth of who each of us is. And in unity, faith is a power. Mm-hmm. Faith is actually something that we are innately born with. It is ours. It's not something we need to get. It's not something we need to learn. It is actually ours right now. Everybody who is listening to my voice is exercising their power of faith in some way, shape, or form. And the question is, what do you have faith in? Where are you placing that faith? And what happens sometimes is we get a little lost. We get so caught up in the conditions that becomes what we're placing our faith in. We think that what we're touching and tasting and smelling and feeling somehow has more value than that which is immutable, unchangeable, that which is the constant, that is the very presence of life itself. Mm-hmm. And so this place is, for me, the most powerful place to be. So instead of it being something that makes us fear and get anxious and get nervous, when we come up against that rock and a hard place, is how I sort of live with it, right? Oh, I'm caught between the rock and the hard place of myself and my awareness. Somewhere in me, there's this divine calling. We just get to be with it. We get to anchor what we know is true. Now, the other part of the question in here is really believing there is any presence that hears our prayers. And I'm going to be really clear here in terms of what I know and believe is that there is no presence that's hearing our prayers outside of us. The thing that affirmative prayer anchors, which makes it so powerful and so unique, and I really do believe that affirmative prayer is the most powerful tool, spiritual tool that unity has given the world. Right? That affirmative prayer is affirming who I am. I'm remembering to remember. I am realigning myself with my divine self. I am taking my focus away from the condition And I am placing it on the very truth of who I am. And in that process, I am changed. I am changed. I'm not looking out there in the world. I'm looking at what can shift within myself. And the whole time, what we're doing with affirmative prayer is we are anchoring the wholeness that we know is the truth of who we are. So those supposed physically damaged individuals, they are whole right now. Right? It's not something they need to become. They already are it. That is a given. It cannot be changed. It cannot be shifted. Regardless of what condition is happening in your life, you are whole. At the heart of your heart, at the root of your root, you are whole.
Right. Yes. Thank you. That's it.
Do you think I have some thoughts and feelings about this topic? Just a little bit, maybe.
A little bit. And I was thinking of my favorite philosopher, Soren Kierkegaard, who said that prayer does not change God, prayer changes the one praying. That it's a process that when we are engaging in that process of truly aligning in that divine presence. And I think of prayer as aligning in that presence. There's a shift that occurs with me as I meditate, as I pray. I go into the silence and I feel this click and I know that it's done. I know that both Reverend DeeAnn and myself have studied Ernest Holmes. And Ernest Holmes, in Science of Mind and other books that he wrote, talks about, and I've discussed this with prayer chaplains, that we are not there to try to correct some situation.
Yes.
And this relates to another question that we didn't get to
in the first service.
We are not there to correct a situation. We are there to see the truth of who this person is. We are there to see them as whole and complete and as divine. We are there to know the truth. So I recommend when people are praying, for example, with someone else, to use the words that make you believe the words you say. So as I'm praying with someone, I am praying, Reverend DeeAnn is whole and complete, and I know it right now, and I'm using the words that are helping to treat my consciousness.
Yes.
I'm not trying to fix her. I'm working on my consciousness of seeing her as whole and complete, so we're not praying the problem, we're praying the truth. We're praying the truth of what is, and it is the absolute truth. Wholeness, health, peace, harmony, all of it is the absolute truth. Don't get lost in the circumstances. Dive in deep to the real consciousness of what we really are.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah. And just remember, prayer is happening in your consciousness. That's the only place it's happening. In consciousness. My consciousness. I can only speak from my understanding of truth. I can't tell Tim what his understanding of truth should be. That's not what we believe in Unity. He gets to choose. He has spiritual autonomy. He gets to stand in his own understanding of his divinity. I get to stand here and see it, and then he gets to decide.
Right.
And that's not, I don't get to judge, right?
Yes.
There's no judgment here. We believe that people get to choose. That's what we stand in more than almost anything else.
Right. To me, it's like tuning forks.
Yeah, that's great.
And so when I'm praying with somebody, because our spirit recognizes the truth. You're recognizing it right now. Those of you who are online, those of you who are here physically, you're recognizing your spirit goes, yeah.
Right.
And it's this resonance. So like we hit this tuning fork and it begins to resonate in the tuning fork in you. I see that as how prayer works. As we are knowing the truth, that knowingness, because we're only one, begins to resonate in this other person because there is only one mind, one power, and it begins to resonate that frequency of truth, and we begin to know the truth of what we really are. So that's how we catch it. And it may take more than one prayer treatment. We persevere with this, but we continue to know the truth, and the truth shall set you free.
And I think this segues very nicely into that question that we didn't do in the first service.
Let's go for it.
Where somebody asked a question. There seems to be a unity rule that to discuss someone else's medical diagnosis is dangerous because it lends energetic or karmic weight from other people and their fears to the illness or problem. Help me to understand how not consciously understanding and acknowledging the reality of another's diagnosis or problem is better than honestly reporting the facts of another medical situation, so that one can focus prayer directly toward correcting what is out of balance.
Right.
So we've already sort of addressed that, right? That affirmative prayer is not correcting. It's not my job to correct something. It's my job just to know the truth.
Right.
Because in the truth, there is no problem.
Right.
There is no problem in the realm of the absolute. It doesn't even exist. Huh.
Yeah.
Right? Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. This is an awesome question. Now, when I have a challenge going on, physically, emotionally, whatever, I am careful about who I share it with. And part of the reason is that I'm not necessarily wanting someone to feel sorry for me. Mm-hmm. I'm not wanting someone to necessarily come up to me each week and say, how is that? Is it better? How are you doing with that? Because I don't want people to focus on the problem. I want people to focus on the truth of what I am. Don't see me as broken. Don't see me as, something that needs to be fixed. Know the truth with me. And that's why when prayer chaplains or any of us who do this prayer work, when we know the truth with somebody, we can release it. We don't have to hang on to it because we know it's already done. It's already here. It's already, all we are wanting to do is to treat our consciousness. So, I am sometimes careful about what I say and to who. And some people can be very, very fear-based. It can be like a car alarm going off. And they just see this problem. They hear this problem, and that's what they get focused on. But again, it's about really focusing on the truth of what is.
It's a shadow component of our teaching.
Talk about that.
Because we believe, so unity started as a healing faith tradition, right? Myrtle healed tuberculosis, right? She was healed. She did the inner work in her consciousness that alleviated whatever condition and symptoms she was experiencing, right? And so it's the foundation of our teaching is we believe in the power of healing. Jesus was a master healer. Yeah. He is a way shower in this understanding of our capacity to heal ourselves. And you look at what's happening in modern science, Joe Dispenza, all this work that people are doing about how the mind and the brain and all of this works. It's all supporting what unity has known for hundreds of years, yes. Right? It's all backing up the thing that we know. But in our teaching, there's this, I call it malpractice, actually, where somebody will share that they're sick or they're ill, and somebody will say, oh, what is in your consciousness that created that for you? Mm-hmm. Wow. Like, that's all I want to say to that. Like, yeah. Wow.
We call that spiritual malpractice.
Yeah. It's definitely malpractice.
We call that spiritual malpractice.
This teaching is not meant to whip you because something isn't showing up in your life the way it's supposed to show up. That is not what this teaching is about. This teaching is about anchoring our capacity to grow and evolve and to heal. And yet there's I call it like Unity 101, which really sort of misses the complexity of how we are operating. My consciousness is not separate from your consciousness. My consciousness is not separate from human race consciousness. Well, guess what? Cancer is in human race consciousness. It's there. Does that mean that I have some sort of false error thinking that I need to be judgmental of myself about? Is that actually going to help my healing process? And we also get attached to the idea that healing means that we are cured. And healing, in Unity's understanding of it, does not necessarily mean a cure. Right? Healing means that we are healed, that the spiritual healing is the triumphant expression of our wholeness. That is what we know and we believe. When we get fixated on the condition, we have lost sight of the spiritual truth of who we are.
Right.
It's that simple. When we find ourselves worrying or fixated on the condition, we are being invited to deepen and to unhook ourselves, to unattach ourselves from whatever it is that we think it should be, and really allow ourselves to fully be.
That's good. You know, when we do this kind of prayer work, we recognize we're in this soup of human consciousness. And when we really, like I was talking about last Sunday, when we really establish where we are, what we are, our intention, then we ground into that. We ground into that absolute. We ground into that divine. So we're not just pulled here and there by the soup of human consciousness. Have you ever been swimming in the soup of human consciousness? It's quite a swim, isn't it? It is not fun. So what we believe and what we know is that we can align in this divine absolute understanding of knowing the truth and not just being pulled here and there by circumstances.
And remembering that we're eternal beings. That the eternality of who we are is the truth of who we are. One of my dearest friends who I went through practitioner training with developed a very rare and very fast-spreading brain cancer. And it was basically about a year from diagnosis to his transition, to his passing away. And the final months, he had a very select core group of people who he was connected with, who he trusted to see his wholeness, who he trusted to not get caught up in the story of what was going on within the physiological matter of his brain. And he shared with me on more than one occasion how grateful he was. Like honestly, authentically grateful for this experience of brain cancer, because it was allowing him to deepen into an understanding of who he was that transcended his understanding of his physical beingness as being the end of something. And he wasn't like making it up, and it wasn't easy. Like, I want to be clear, it was a process that he was working through. But his final moments were truly, I'm free. Like, I'm free. That was his like moment of clarity. And that's what I mean when I say a healing is not necessarily a cure. Because he had a healing on that deepest level. And that's what we anchor, right? The cure is absolutely possible. We hold that as well.
Right.
But we don't get so fixated on that we're missing the ultimate truth of who we truly are.
Right. Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you.
Can you tell I have a passion about this too?
Yes. Yes. So one of the questions we were asked.
Oh, let's do the ego one.
Yes, that's what I was going to go to. What suggestions do each of you have for distinguishing between valid intuition and personality or ego-based projection about a given situation, circumstance, or other person? How can one tell with confidence whether a feeling to do or not to do something is authentic and should be followed? That's an interesting word, should be followed, and whether it is just something one made up out of fear or a collection of semi-conscious personal or karmic material. I know in my own life, that it's a lifelong process, and I've been experiencing more and more clarity as I go into what Charles and Myrtle Fillmore described as the silence. Going into the silence is allowing ourselves to really let the mind slow down like a feather settling to the ground and getting clear with that true self, the I am self that was never born, will never die, that true divine self. When I align in that presence, it becomes more and more clear what I'm here to do. And so intuition for me is very linked with what in Unity we call the power of understanding. We use all of these 12 powers in different ways, just as DeeAnn was talking about the power of faith. All of us have it because all of us believe something. But with the power of understanding, we use our power of understanding, maybe it is faulty, based on some past experiences or something that may really skew our understanding. But what I have known is that when I go into that divine presence and align with that, I know that I know. There are times where I know that I know that I know. And in that moment, it is clear. And from that, I can live and operate and have my beingness. Just as Paul said in Acts chapter 17, in God we live, move, and have our being. When I experience that alignment, that presence, that oneness, then I am operating from what I believe is a consciousness, a divine consciousness of intuition, a divine consciousness of understanding. And that word should, you know, we all have some embedded theology, FS. And
me too.
What we mean by embedded theology is this stuff that you grew up with. You may have just enculturated it from the culture. Maybe you didn't even grow up in a church tradition. But this idea that there's something we should do as we go deeper and deeper into that alignment of the divine is not so much about what we should do. It's about opening us up to be that which we are here to be. You are called to be what you are. We have one of the greatest messages. You are called to be what you are. You don't have to be something else. But what we're calling forth is to open up to that most divine expression of what you are. So it's not grounded in fear and guilt and shame, but it's truly coming out of that alignment of the presence.
Yes. Yes. Clearly, yes, right? Preach. What I love about that question, though, is that it really does touch on this process that is the revelation of our Christ self being revealed in time and in space. So I look at this as being what I call the balancing point of God. Uh-huh. It's the place where our humanness and our divinity are dancing together. And ideally, that dance is synchronized and aligned, as Tim was speaking to so eloquently. And yet there are those moments when we are unsure. And so the invitation that I would offer in this is the awareness that it's all a process of revelation of divinity. And so whether it's driven by fear or not, when you step out in fear and then you realize, wow, I was really operating from fear there. Can I get an amen? Anybody in here experience that? Right? You're like, whoa, what was that? Instead of beating ourselves up about it, we get to sit back and say, okay, that was fear. And then the next time that feeling arises within us, we go, what if I don't move yet? What if I notice that this is fear that wants me to do something, right? And instead of just touching that level of my understanding, right, that I actually am willing to look beneath that, to see what's underneath the fear. What
Yes.
else is
Yes.
operating there? And that's how we begin to learn and grow and evolve and
Yes.
shift and change. And that's how we begin to learn
Right.
what our divine intuition actually feels like. I call it breaking the divine code. That we have to experiment and figure out because for each of us it's different. For each of us, the awareness of when we are aligned is going to feel unique and different to each of us. So my understanding of it is that I'm on a journey of really trying to understand how do I break that code of my own divine self. And it's going to feel a certain way. And then I get to know that that was me aligned. And the more we experience it, the more we get to re-experience it. The more we trust it, right? The more we get to live into it more fully. So that when fear shows up for me, because fear's job is to fear, so fear is going to show up, right? I can actually, 70% of the time, I can sort of see its fear and I can just quiet it. And then the other 25% of the time, it sort of gets right here. And I have to take a big breath, and I'm able to still center myself. And then that other 5% of the time, my wife will look at me and go, "You are so not being ministerial right now."
It's only 5%?
Yeah, when I really totally lose it and I go off the edge completely, but when I do go off the edge, folks, I'm in free fall. Let me be clear.
And I've talked to a few people about this, but when fear comes up for me, I don't fight it. I talk with it. Mm-hmm. I sit in the silence and I say, okay, what is it that you want? What is it that you're concerned about? What is it that you're afraid of? Where are you coming from? I sit with it. Because I find when I'm resisting it, it seems to give more power. So I listen, and it's like, what are you trying to teach me? And generally speaking, it's coming out of some past coping mechanism that I can say, hey, thank you for showing up. Thank you for expressing concern. Thank you for wanting to protect me. And you know what? I'm going to take care of you. I am now an adult. I'm no longer in that situation. I can now embrace wholeness and health and peace. And instead of rejecting it, I embrace it. And then it goes, So it moves from the driver's seat and it goes to sleep in the back seat while I'm driving.
I call that being your own answered prayer.
Yes.
Right? You actually answer your own prayer, whatever that prayer is, for calm, for peace, for safety, for security, for protection. I just want to know what's happening, whatever that fear mechanism is, right? That you can actually be your own answered prayer in that moment. And that's the practice.
Yes.
It's a practice. And what we practices us. So the more we practice that, the deeper we grow, the more entrenched our understanding is able to be, so that the smaller waves of chaos, we don't even notice them anymore. Right? Because we are really still and anchored in something that's powerful.
Right. Now, we probably need to conclude, and we didn't get to everything.
I know.
And we covered some things in the first service that we didn't cover here, and we covered some things in this service
that we didn't cover there.
So you can watch both, right? And we want to thank you for the wonderful questions. We know that there's other questions that maybe didn't get expressed or whatever, but I think you have some affirmations for us to help sink us in.
So the first affirmation, I am willing to be curious.
I am willing to be curious.
I am willing to live into the question.
I am willing to live into the question.
I am willing to be changed at core.
I am willing to be changed at core.
And so it is.
So it is. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.